So, a few strange things have happened to me lately. For context, my husband is a truck driver and he's gone 2 to 3 weeks at a time. We live way out in the woods. Nearest neighbours are about 2 miles away. It's not a place to find easily unless you know exactly where you are looking for. I work at home, am very private about my life on social media, and do not do anything unnecessary that would be easy to find me. I'm a very private person. I barely use Facebook, except to keep in contact with a few family members. So I found it odd that around a week ago, a clearly made up name for a Facebook user messages me, knows my real name. I use a pen name for my Facebook where I post memes and my artwork. He gives me details on what my home looks like, my town, and where I work. Odd, but I ignored it. The next day, the same user messages asking very personal questions and stating disturbing things they would like to do, and how easy it would be to get inside my home. I show my husband, who replies with the same user messaging disturbing odd things to him, as well as asking him very private things about me. Long story short, we find it weird, but decide to block the account. As last week passes, I have received calls and text messages, assumingly from the same account. Every time I answered the phone, it was just deep breathing and then hanging up. Eventually, it freaked me out to the point I've put up trail cams and security cameras on my porch and around the property. Well, this morning, I went to town for some errands and my Ring doorbell goes off and there is a man wearing a black hoodie, hiding most of his face, standing on my back porch, and then banging on the door increasingly louder and yelling my name. This went on for at least 15 minutes until he just stopped and walked off into the woods. I called the police, who checked the house and around the property and haven't found anyone. I even gave them the pictures caught on my trail cams. Basically, nothing can be done unless I am in immediate danger or he gets inside. They just suggested that I get a guard dog. My husband believes it's just a neighbour or friend pulling a prank. But this isn't like anything anyone I know would pull. The questions and statements made about what this person wanted to do is incredibly creepy. My husband and family think I'm overreacting, but to see someone just standing in my backyard, super late at night, when I live this far out, isn't normal. I'm freaking out and I don't know what to do. So for an update on the strange goings on, I woke up this morning, checked the cameras, no weirdos on the porch this time, but an eerie feeling all around, and a dead bird right off my porch. There was blood, so I'm really hoping that it was an animal attack. Clearly I'm paranoid. I spoke on the phone with my husband, and he sent screenshots of the messages he received. I unblocked and tried to call the number to see what would happen, and it says it's inactive. Reverse search for the number says it's a texting app number randomly given to the person, which is creepy. I'm having my younger brother come and stay with me for about a week. He will be doing his college classes at home here. I know that sounds silly, but I cannot afford to stay at a hotel. He's the only family member I keep in touch with on a regular basis. My relationship with the rest of my family is strained due to childhood trauma issues. And lastly, he's ridiculously big and strong for a 20-year-old kid, and he's fearless. I just feel better having someone here since I can't exactly stay anywhere else. I also plan on getting a dog later in the week, and I've also ordered better cameras to set up. My brake lines were cut about a month ago. I'm really suspicious now as my cameras didn't pick up anyone. Now I have neighbours who live on the main road just before you turn down the back road all the way to get out here. They said they hadn't seen anything weird, but they would keep an eye out for now. Now I've read some of the comments people have mentioned, and a lot of people were suspicious of my husband. I just want to let you all know I hear you. I'm not ignoring the signs. To be frank with the strangers on the internet, I'm worried myself. I love him to death, and I'm not about to go on a crazy train of accusing my husband of attempting to murder me, or even anything harmless or as a prank. However, I am a very suspicious person who does not trust anyone 100%. There haven't really been any signs of anything weird on this end that I haven't noticed yet, and I have confirmed he's been over the road like he has said, but I'm just keeping the idea in my head, just in case. I have Mace, and I am about to check the cameras again, and I leave to pick up my brother. One last thing is, I am in America, so I have been considering buying a gun and concealed carry permit. I grew up on a farm. I know how to shoot. I just prefer not to mess with them. If anything more happens, I think I'm going to do it. And thanks so much for the support for not making me feel crazy. Several years ago, I was in the midst of an acrimonious divorce from my then husband, full of crazy allegations and typical angry filings centred around custody of our child. As with many divorces, friends and professional colleagues seemed to pick one side or the other. In my case, there was one sort of professional contact who reached out to me after hearing about the divorce, who offered to be a witness for my case because of some experiences he related that I had been previously unaware of regarding my ex's behaviour out at networking events. After this initial call, he started calling on a semi-regular basis to make sure I was okay. This wasn't someone I knew well prior to the separation, and he was much older than I was, but claimed to have experience with divorce and custody, and I figured it was a good idea to be polite and not alienate him, since his testimony was important, per my lawyer. I kept things friendly, but I always had a weird feeling about him. After a few months, he called one day when my son was very sick, and when I told him I couldn't talk and explained why, he offered to run to the store for me, which I honestly appreciated. But after that, he was dropping by the house uninvited, or he would stop by with cookies for my son, and so forth. Again, I kept telling myself to keep things polite. The divorce is coming soon. Don't make this guy mad. He had called me out of the blue, and I was worried at this point that I was walking a very fine line, being polite, but clearly not interested, and that if he got mad, he might decide to go testify for my ex and say who knows what. During this time, he'd also helped me set up a security camera system my dad had mailed me, and at one point, I needed someone to walk my dog, and he had offered to do it. He used and returned a spare key the same day. One evening, he showed up while I was painting and insisted on sticking around to help, even though I was having my starting over catharsis and wanted to do it alone. Just after the painting day, he came around, uninvited and unannounced, with magazine photos of decor, and started carrying on in this manic way about how we could finish the decorating the house. I was so weirded out that I made an excuse to leave, started ignoring his calls, and took my son and dog to stay with my parents for several weeks to avoid a drop-in. I came home a few weeks later, thinking he would have gotten the hint. The following morning, I took my son on an outing. I think it may have been the zoo, and we both came back hot and tired. Put my kiddo down for a nap in my bed and decided to close my eyes with him. I woke up maybe an hour or so later, and it took me a moment to realise something was way off. As I'm blinking off the sleep, I realised there was a rose bush sitting on my bedside table that I most definitely had not put there. There was a post-it note on it, something about planting it in the yard. I started shaking immediately because I recognised the handwriting and stood up to go splash some water in my face and decided whether or not to call my parents or the police. I didn't want any trouble because of the divorce. As I stepped into my bathroom, I realised that the mirror was covered in post-it notes, all with super creepy messages that were intended as like love notes or with affection, but which all of them scared me. I was still waking up and trying to figure out how these notes could possibly have gotten into my house. My front door was definitely locked, but as I went from room to room, there were notes everywhere. I mean hundreds of post-it notes covering the walls, in my cabinets. There was even one inside my coffee maker. I started grabbing all of them and putting them into a pile. When I got to one in the kitchen that made my blood run cold, it said, You're cute when you think no one is watching you. And I realised that there was a security camera pointed right where that note was left. The one he had helped me set up months earlier, when I didn't think he was a psychopath. I called my parents in hysterics, sent them a bunch of photos, and my dad insisted I should not call the police. Remember, custody battle. But that he would drive over and change the locks and put a chain on the door. We also immediately changed the passwords on the security cameras, which had been installed to document if my ex tried to break into the house. So there was one on the front porch, but 3 inside the house, including one in my bedroom. This man could apparently see and hear everything going on inside my house for months. He had just paid attention to my passwords when I was setting up the system, but the only way I can figure out that he got into my house is that he must have made a copy of my house key the day he had it. And because my dog had gotten to know him, he wouldn't have barked to warn me, which also scared me, if I'm honest. I was absolutely horrified. This man had been in my house for a long time. There's no way he could have put up that many notes so quickly. And he was right next to my face and feet from my son while we were sleeping, and somehow thought this was okay. I left and stayed with my parents again for a few days, afraid of what he was going to do when he realised that he was now both physically and digitally locked out of my house. When I came home, my son had gone to his dad's for the night, and I was home alone on the phone with another friend from out of town. At about 10 p.m, this man showed up at the door, pounding on it, trying the locks, screaming obscenities, and demanding to be let into his house. Gone were all the niceties. This was someone completely furious and derailed. All I could do was hide in my bedroom until he left. And this happened on St. Patrick's Day, so I'm sure he'd been drinking. After that, there were several other times someone would start knocking on the door in the middle of the night, always when my son wasn't home. I thought he was crazy, but not that crazy, and figured if I called the police, he would get in more trouble if my son was there. But he knew the schedule, so I knew it was him. He tried reaching out using fake social media accounts several times, always getting blocked. Years later, I discovered he had friended my mum on Facebook and was therefore still able to see all the photos of us that she posted or shared. And there was a huge argument when I saw she had left her computer logged in. A conversation they were having about me and how he could get back into my life. I sold that house 2 years later, still finding new notes even as I was packing, and I am more than relieved that he no longer knows where I live. I didn't post photos of my new house online, not the front anyway, and I have changed the privacy settings on my social media accounts. I avoid all the places he used to go, the networking events he attends, and I stay as under the radar as possible. I could never bring myself to play back the security camera videos because I was so traumatized enough. I didn't want to see just how much danger we could have been in. Hopefully, he never sees or hears this, but you know who you are. I hope our paths don't cross ever again. This actually happened a few hours ago, and I'm still unsettled about the whole encounter. I decided to drop it over here to get it out of my system. I've had creeps tailgate me or try to grab my attention on the road, and I just ignore them, which has always worked. But this guy takes the golden medal. My shift starts at the afternoon, and I was feeling off for most of the day. A beautiful sunny day, mind you. You know, one of those days where you drag yourself out of bed just to adulting? I decided to lift my mood up, so I wore something new that I had. A beautiful creamy white faux fur vest, and I hit the road. Look like $1 million, feel like $1 million, right? Maybe not. I played some piano tracks and hoped that I'll get out of this funk. I just needed something to comfort me, and those two things didn't cut it. While I was driving to work, I decided to grab a drink. An iced, crisp green tea will definitely lift my spirit. I could have gone to the first one with the drive-thru, but they use a pretty crappy tea brand, as they ran out of all the good stuff. So I had to go to that one that was inside a mall. Anything to feel better, right? I parked my car and saw a private fleet of black SUVs, making it difficult to view the entrance. This is important later. I grabbed the cold bottle of water and headed to the counter. I paid for my drink and got a cherry lollipop, because why not? Waited for my drink, and once I got it, started walking out. I had to pass a fountain in the courtyard before I can reach the exit. I slowed my pace as I noticed that I was walking too fast. I felt a bit off, but brushed it off. As I passed between the SUVs, a bus shot through quickly. I stopped in shock as I almost walked in its path. This didn't make me realise what was happening, as I got distracted and wasn't aware of my surroundings. As I walked further, I had to pass an area where there isn't anyone. It was shaded but still outdoor, almost like under a bridge-style building, if that makes any sense. This was the way to my car. I noticed that I wasn't aware of my surroundings till I heard footsteps on my right. Then, I saw a man in my peripheral vision, walking and matching my speed. At first, I thought he was in a uniform, so I assumed he was part of the cleaning staff in the mall. I felt off, but told myself that I'm being paranoid and overthinking. Next to my car, and on my left side, was a woman with a child who were getting into their car. This will make sense later. I was sandwiched between my car and hers. I was getting my keys out of my fur vest, and then I had to turn around in order to open my driver door, as I was a bit ahead of it. Once I turned, I saw a man standing. Looked like he was in his late 30s. Skinny, average height. He had a dark blue baseball cap with sunglasses, a grey shirt with some print on it, and black sweatpants. Crocs shoes with socks. He was so close that it took me by surprise and I was startled. But being nice and polite is in my blood, so I assumed nothing. The first thing he said was, "Why are you afraid?" I told him that I wasn't and asked him what he wanted. "Is your car for sale?" he said while grinning. I said no. Then he started to ask about how my day was going and stuff along those lines. The heck, I don't know you. Alarm bells were ringing in my head. I smiled as not to escalate the situation. I knew I had to do something. He was blocking my way to the mall entrance, and if I decided to go the other way, which is a pretty large shaded parking lot. "It was nice to meet you, but I gotta leave. Give me your phone number." I just repeated the same phrase and took a step closer to my door, as I didn't want to show him that I was actually afraid. Then he said something that made me want to crawl out of my skin. "Give me your phone number, so I don't have to chase you around in my car." At this moment, I knew I had to move fast. So I opened the door and ignored him. He kept talking, and I wasn't sure what he was saying, as it felt muffled. My anxiety was higher than tip of Mount Everest now, and I was hit with this realisation that even in public spaces and in broad daylight, with people around, you can lose your sense of safety in a split second. I closed the door quickly and locked it. My fingers felt weak, but I managed to turn on the car. He kept knocking on my window. He was so insistent. I put my car on reverse mode, but I couldn't back out. The woman was halfway getting out of her parking spot, thus forcing me to wait. He kept knocking pretty hard and saying stuff. At that moment, I honestly couldn't hear him. All I wanted was to nope out of there. I was so afraid and just baffled. I had to look out the window to see when the road was clear so I can back out, all while he was standing in front of my window, rapidly knocking on it. I avoided making eye contact with him. Once the road was clear, I hit the gas pedal and sped off. I drove to random places while my eyes were fixed on my rearview mirror, just to make sure that he wasn't following me. It was so hard to breathe as my chest felt so heavy and my heart was beating out of my chest. I was glad he wasn't there. This creep followed me around the mall and waited for the right moment when I was alone, and he threatened me to give him my phone number. I was totally unaware of how creepy he was. So, to the guy with the baseball cap and Crocs with socks, let's not meet ever again.